In the previous video, we've learned about the consequences of monetary expansion in ISLM-BP model with general functions. So now the next rational step is to see what happens as a result of fiscal expansion. So we've written here the system that we already used. We have Jacobian over there, and now we need to use the same tricks as before. So we want to know what are the effects of fiscal expansion. So first thing we need to assume is that level of government spending is increasing. However, as before, what we want to do at the same time is to isolate the effect of monetary policy and changes in our interest rate. So what we should do over here is to assume again that money supply and our interest rate are remaining constant. And now look, with this assumption, we can get rid out of these two expressions. So again, we're going to use the first assumption to find comparative static derivatives, because again, I can divide both sides of this system by dg0. I'm going to get 1 over here, and those differentials will turn into comparative static derivatives that we need to find. Okay, so again, we're going to start with GDP. Let's see what happens if government increases the level of spending. Again, we need to start by calculating Jacobian. Right? And again, I'm going to take I'm going to take CAE out, and of course I'm replacing the first column with vector of exogenous terms. Right? So we've got CAE, and we've got 1, 0, 0, negative I prime, Li, Ki, negative 1, 0, 1. And look, we can deal with this very easily using the Laplace expansion, right? We will have that this is CAE times, we delete first row, first column, Li, 0, Ki, 1. And out of this, we get that this is CAE, Li. Right away we can assess that this expression is negative because by assumptions, of course, depreciation improves current account, so this is positive, while interest rate increases the cost of holding money, so this expression is negative. And look, knowing this, we can easily calculate comparative static of income with respect to government spending. Again, this is going to be J y over Jacobian. And again, look, we remember the thing that the Jacobian has CA at the beginning as well as CY, so those two will cancel each other out, and then our entire comparative static derivatives turns into 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime, Li plus Ly I prime minus Ki. Okay, so we've got Li over here. Okay, and the next thing we can do here is to divide everything out by Li, right? So I divide numerator and denominator by Li. So I'm getting y over here, nothing here, and Ly over Li. Okay, now let's focus on this expression. We can focus on this expression. Okay, what do we see over here? Look, let's forget about this. Well, what we see over here is government expenditures multiplier in national income money, right? This is by how much GDP would increase if we didn't introduce money market and international transactions. However, look, when we introduced the money market, we had this, right? What was this expression that we see over here? Look, let's write this expression in a different way. We can write this as Ly, Li, I prime, minus Ly, Li, K. Okay, look, in the Iceland model without open economy, this was our comparative static derivative of GDP with respect to government spending. We know that here, because those two are negative, right? This is positive. We are simply adding a number, which means we divide by a bigger number, right? Which means the value of this is smaller than in the national income model, right? And we said that this is due to the fact that in a closed economy, higher income leads to higher money demand, then higher money demand leads to higher interest rate, and higher interest rate is associated with lower investment. And this was internal crowding out effect. And then, as a result of introducing transactions with the rest of the world, we got this. Again, this expression is positive because this is negative, so, and those two are positive, right? So again, we divide 1 by even a bigger number. Where does this come from? Look, this is telling us that as a result of government expenditure, GDP grows and money demand grows. With higher money demand and the same money supply, we will have higher interest rate, and with higher interest rate, we will observe capital inflow. But remember one thing, when we have capital inflow, what does it do to our currency? Well, it means that people from the rest of the world decided that our assets, they see that our assets are becoming more attractive, they bring higher rate of return, so they want to buy them. If they want to buy them, they need to buy our currency. If they buy our currency, of course, it means that there is higher demand for our currency, there's pressure on appreciation of our currency. And look, this pressure on appreciation of our currency makes our goods more expensive to foreigners. And as a result, GDP falls because we've got worse trade balance. And this part is called external crowding out effect. Okay, and look, just by looking at this expression and comparing it with the expressions that we had before for this comparative static derivative, or government expenditure multiplier, we see some pattern. The first part of this pattern is that when we introduce money market, the value of the multiplier has gone down. Why? Well, because, as we said, higher GDP with higher money demand means higher interest rate and lower investment. And then look, when we open the economy, we've got another source of another factor that diminishes impact of government expenditures on GDP. This time, it is capital mobility and current account, right? Due to pressure on appreciation of the currency, the crowding out effect, the external part, further diminishes the effect of fiscal policy. Look, and this actually should give us some idea about effectiveness of government expenditure in open economy. Of course, we are assuming flexible exchange rate. So exchange rate is determined by the market. Look, when we were discussing monetary expansion, we've actually reached opposite conclusion. We reached the conclusion that when economy was opened and we have flexible exchange rate, monetary policy actually became more effective, more powerful tool in influencing GDP. In case of fiscal expansion, we see that actually something different is happening. Actually see that when we open the economy, we've actually made the effect of fiscal expansion small. Okay, well, I think just this gave us a lot, right? However, before we can build the full story, we of course need to calculate other comparative static derivatives. Okay, so now let's see what happens to interest rate when government spending is increased. So we calculate Jacobian I, right? Again, I'm taking CAE out, right? And I'm substituting vector of exogenous terms instead of a middle column. Minus C and Y, Ly C Y, 1 0 0. There's negative 1 0 1. Okay, and look again. I can easily use Laplace expansion, right? Of course, the obvious choice is the second column. Okay, when I use Laplace expansion, I'm getting that this is negative CAE, right? Because this is in the first row, second column. And we get that this is Ly CAY 0 1. And this is giving us negative CAE Ly. Okay, we already know that by assumptions, this expression is positive, this expression is positive, we've got minus in front, so it needs to be negative. Okay, and look, now we can see what is the comparative static derivative. What is comparative static derivative of equilibrium interest rate with respect to government spending? Okay, so we divide Jacobian I by Jacobian. Again, this is a situation when CAE over here and in the Jacobian will cancel each other out. So what we get is negative Ly over 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime, Li plus Ly, I prime minus Ki. Okay, we know that the expression at the bottom, in the bottom, is negative. Expression at the top is positive. So we know it is negative. So we know the whole thing is going to be positive. And look, it makes perfect sense. The higher the government expenditure, the higher the GDP, the higher the money demand, the higher the interest rate. Actually, we could predict higher interest rate based on just what we said about the previous comparative static derivative. Okay, so now we need to find the third comparative static derivative. So the comparative static derivative for exchange rate. Okay, so this time we calculate Jacobian E, and it goes like this. We leave the first two columns untouched. And we replace the last one with ones and zeros. Again, look, using Laplace expansion, in this situation, it's going to be very simple, right? We get out of this one, we get just Ly, Li, Cy, Ki. Okay, and this is equal to Ly, Ki minus Cy, Li. Okay. Now, we're going to be talking about this expression for quite a long time. Because actually, right away, you can see that this is positive. This is positive. So this thing must be positive. This is negative. And this is negative, right? So this is positive. And right, look, we've got one positive expression, then we need to subtract from another positive expression. So in this case, we cannot say whether this expression is actually bigger or lower than 0. So we don't know. And look, in this case, we can write that that comparative static derivative of equilibrium level of income of equilibrium level of exchange rate with respect to government spending, which is given by J E over J, is given by Ly Ki minus Cay Li. Okay, so over here, of course, we will have the Jacobian, and we know that this Jacobian is lower than 0. So look, basically, we've got a case like that. In open economy, in the short run, fiscal expansion leads definitely to increase in GDP. It definitely leads to increase in interest rate. However, the effect of fiscal expansion on exchange rate is unknown. And look, in this case, in this setting, the best way to deal with this problem is by considering two different cases. We usually, when we're going to be doing this international economies, we're going to do 4. But actually, once you understand 2, the other ones, the other 2 are the borderline cases. Okay, and let me explain this to you. Okay, so look, as it turns out, are the case of high capital mobility and the case of low capital mobility. Okay, so let's start with case number 1. This is the case of high capital mobility. Okay. Now, in this context, what do high capital mobility mean for us? Look, imagine a case like that. Let's just say that Ly minus Ki is bigger than Cay Li. Okay, look, what happens in this situation? In this situation, numerator of expression for comparative static derivative of equilibrium exchange rate is actually positive, right? So this implies that we divide positive by negative, this is lower than 0. So what is happening over here is that government expenditure actually causes, higher government expenditure causes appreciation of the currency. Okay, but look, we can clearly see that this expression now is not telling us much. What could we do with it to actually tell us a little bit more? Okay, let's do a very simple thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by derivative Ki. Okay, so I'm meaning that this is Ly Cay over Ki Li. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by Li. However, remember one thing, Li is smaller than 0. So if I divide both sides by number that is smaller than 0, I need to change the sign of inequality, right? So I got Ly over Li being bigger than Cay over Ki. Okay, and look, now we just need to do a very okay, I'm sorry, that was okay. Here we change the sign. I'm sorry, I just did this one step too fast. Okay, and now what we do is we multiply both sides by -1. Okay, and look, over here, what I'm getting is negative Ly over Li is bigger than negative Cay over Ki. Okay, at the first sight, this might not look like much to you. However, let's notice that we have seen this expression somewhere. Where did we see this expression? Well, this is equal to di over dy in the context of Lm, right? So this expression that you see over here gives us the slope of Lm. Here, on the other side, we have also slope of something that we should remember. This is also a slope, right? But this time, this is the slope of BP curve. And look, now we've got a straightforward connection between degree of capital mobility, slopes of IS and slopes of LM, and impact of government spending on exchange rate, and through that on effectiveness of fiscal policy. Okay, let's see this situation on the graph. Okay, we will need this a little bit later, but once you understand this case, the second one is just straightforward. Okay, so we've got our plot. Here's Y, here's I. Here we've got IS. Now, here we've got LM. And we know that the slope of LM is bigger than the slope of IS, so of BP. So BP is here. And look, every time when BP is flatter than LM, we call this situation high capital mobility. And what do I mean by this high capital mobility? I'm going to explain right now. Okay, so what we need to do now is to examine step by step what happens with fiscal expansion. And look, let's start as before. What happens inside the economy? So if government spending increases, of course this causes GDP to go up. Now, when GDP goes up, money demand goes up. And when money demand goes up, interest rate goes down, and goes up, and investment go down, and as a result, GDP falls. Right? This is what we get, right? In the closed economy. So higher government expenditures causes higher GDP and higher interest rate. However, higher interest rate diminishes GDP. This is the crowding out effect. Okay, but not to complicate things too much, this is all at which we will be concentrated on. So look, basically, what I'm going to do over here is that we're going to ignore internal crowding out effect. We're going to just focus on external crowding out effect. Okay, so let's say first, what happens in the economy when government increases spending is that IS moves over here, right? And we will have this equilibrium in a closed economy over here with higher GDP and higher interest rate. However, we know two things. First, higher interest rate in our country means that we are going to have. So, what happens if interest rate goes up? Our assets are becoming relatively more attractive than foreign assets, right? So, what we will see is the capital inflow, and we will see that capital account is going to go into surplus. So, if interest rate goes up, capital account goes into surplus. Why? Well, of course, our assets have become more attractive, right? So people want to buy more of our bonds, right? Because they yield higher interest. Now, however, if people want to buy our assets, they need to buy more of our currency. And this creates pressure on appreciation of the currency. However, over here we see higher GDP. Higher GDP means that we import more, so current account goes into deficit. When current account goes into deficit, of course, this creates pressure for depreciation. And now is the question, which of these two pressures is stronger? Now look, this is the case of high capital mobility. We can basically say, in this case, the capital account dominates balance of payment, which means that the effects of capital account are far stronger than those of current account. And as a result, we will see appreciation. And what does appreciation do? Appreciation of our currency makes our current account go even further into deficit. Our GDP falls, and with GDP money demand and interest rate. So, what we see over here is actually the effect of external crowding out, because higher interest rate created pressure on appreciation of our currency, and our currency appreciated because this is case of high capital mobility. When capital account dominates current account, appreciation worsens current account even more, GDP falls, and with GDP money demand and interest rate. Now look, how will we see this on the graph? Well, first, we will see appreciation of the currency. This appreciation of the currency we will see as BP curve moving upwards. And finally, after the currency, if currency appreciates, it worsens our current account, and as a result, IS moves back over here, and what we see is that we've got GDP that is higher and interest rate that is higher. However, the one thing here that we should notice is that, look, because our currency appreciated, what we actually saw is that GDP increased by less than it would happen in a closed economy. And the same is for interest rate, that increased by less than it would in the closed economy, because in the closed economy, the equilibrium would be here. So look, we definitely see that opening the economy worsens it worsens the effectiveness of fiscal expansion. But look, now let's consider the opposite case. So case number 2 is a case of low capital mobility. Look, in this scenario, we just need to reverse all the inequalities. And what do we get as a result? First, we see that if now I screwed something up. Here is this, and this is okay. Yeah. So we see that now we are considering the case that Ly times Ki is smaller than Cay Li. Remember, that is the numerator in the comparative static derivatives. So look, now, when government spending is increased, this actually causes a depreciation of our currency. So look, we should expect that if we have low capital mobility, so when slope of LM is smaller than the slope of BP, the situation will be reversed. So actually, impact of government spending on equilibrium exchange rate will be associated with depreciation, not appreciation. Okay, look, the best way to see it is, of course, again on the graph and by going through all the steps and everything that is happening in this economy. Okay, so give me a minute to erase everything, and now let's go through it. Okay, so we draw graph. So we've got some IS, and now this is our LM, and this is our BP. Look, now simply BP is always steeper than LM. And again, we're going to start by government increases level of spending. As a result, GDP increases, money demand goes up, and interest rate goes up. Again, this is the internal effect. So what would happen if the economy was a closed economy? Okay, and now we can see what is going to happen as a result of government expenditures, taking into consideration relationships with the rest of the world. So, higher GDP means that current account goes into deficit, higher imports, so we need more of foreign money, right? And with the fact that we need more foreign money means that there is a pressure on depreciation of our currency. Now, here we've got opposite situation. Higher interest rate means that capital account goes into surplus. When capital account goes into surplus, of course, people from outside the rest of the world want to buy more of our assets and more of our currency. There is a pressure on depreciation. Now, which of these two pressures win? Well, this time, because we have low capital mobility, now current account dominates balance of payment and definitely overshadows capital account. So this time, the pressure from current account on depreciation is winning. So, what is going to happen now? Well, we see that exchange rate, that as a result of depreciation of the currency, current account improves as the GDP, which causes higher money demand and higher interest rate, which causes which actually puts further pressure on capital account. Oh, yeah, but let's put this whole thing on the graph. So now look, if now exchange rate depreciates, BP curve moves to the right. Okay. BP curve moves to the right, and then as the outcome of improvement in the current account, IS moves over here. So we see that sign, GDP actually increased by much, but by more than it had in the closed economy. So this brings us to a very important economic conclusion about the effectiveness of fiscal versus monetary policy. Look, in case of monetary policy, if we open economy, assuming flexible exchange rate, the policy becomes more effective regardless of the degree of capital mobility. However, the higher the degree of capital mobility, the more effective the policy is. Then, in case of fiscal policy, we see that actual effectiveness of fiscal policy in open economy with flexible exchange rates depends on the degree of capital mobility. With high capital mobility, a fiscal policy is less effective than in closed economy, and with low capital mobility, it's actually more effective than in closed economy. Okay, so this is it about fiscal policy. However, there's one more thing we haven't covered. And we haven't covered changes in the world interest rate. So let me get into that. Remember, our system of simultaneous equations in matrix notation look like minus c prime minus t prime minus c a y ly c a y minus I prime I k I minus c a e 0 c a e. We've got d y d I d e, and this is equal to dg0 dm0 negative kiw di w. Okay. Now, we've examined impact of fiscal and monetary policy. But look, one thing we haven't done is we haven't checked what happens if world interest rate is changing. And this is what I would like you to do at home. Look, you need to consider the case now that DIW is different than 0. So, world interest rate goes up, and at the same time, our government and central bank are doing nothing. Right? Let's see what happens now. Look, those turns into zeros, just like we had before. Now, if I divide both sides by DIW, right? This is what I'm going to have over here. And here, we're going to have all comparative static. I'm sorry, derivatives. So, what I would like for you to do is to check what happens to equilibrium income, interest rate, and exchange rate when world interest rate goes up. Okay, thank you for your attention and see you in the next video.